Our story begins with 6 randos dropped in a random spot on a random world under the chaotic wing of Randy Random. The seed I used to germinate this beautiful, disgusting world was something equally beautiful and disgusting: the mantis shrimp. This beautiful creature possesses the unique ability to see all wavelengths of light: UV, infrared, gamma. It can see them all, and what a beautiful world it must see. Does the mantis shrimp give thanks to its creator and pass along this beauty in its own special way? Absolutely not. It selfishly keeps all the beauty for itself and doles out disgusting, disgusting pain. You see, the mantis shrimp is also known for having a punch velocity matched only by a speeding bullet. This monstrosity of the sea is one of the most soul-wrenching killers I've ever laid eyes on. With its ultrasonic strikes, it splits this crab's face in 2. Then it strikes again, and again, and again, until the crab is nothing more than a quivering piece of refuse. Then the mantis shrimp sucks out its brains and looks for something else to pulverize. This story will be much like the mantis shrimp, minus the beauty. The scenario is as follows. 6 randomly selected survivors are sent off to a distant planet where they must survive. That's it. Our intrepid cast consists of Ape, the kind body purist; Menvi, a female misogynist undergrounder, meaning she doesn't know how to be outside; and a body purist. Then there's Dweeby. What he lacks in tolerance he makes up for in immunity. He's also a body purist. Nikartros just doesn't get along well with others, and is also a body purist. Then there's Gray, an ugly cannibal who's incapable of violence, and is also a body purist. Finally, there's Bogogan, the counterweight to Menvi, a misandrist, and a body purist. They landed in a terrible bog with 67 hyperweave war veils, 44 plate armor, 53 wake-up, 713 venison, 35 machine pistols, and exactly 1 vent. To keep things interesting, the map is also scattered with 44 Muffalo wool toques, 69 granite horseshoe pins, 444 ibex meat, and 14 lavish meals. Surely some of that will be good for trade. Our 6 colonies landed in their drop pods, and right away, Randy Random decided to remove Ape from existence. The remaining colonists get to work, donning their silver armor and wool toques, and equipping machine pistols, except for Gray, who is incapable of violence. I'm sure that won't come back to bite him. Then they set up a stockpile zone, started planting some potatoes, and began building a simple bunkhouse, and a lynx even joined in on the fun. But Randy, the supreme lord of chaos that he is, sent a painful psychic drone annoying everyone. Already there were extreme break risks. Gray was the first one to break, but he only went in 2 days, wandering around and mumbling lullabies to himself. All things considered, that's not so bad. Soon after, however, Bogogan went catatonic, collapsing to the ground and retreating into the deepest recesses of her mind until she could recover from her alcohol addiction. Not long after, Menvi threw a tantrum and began smashing up all her hard work. Don't do that, Menvi. Then the starvation began. They were able to locate 1 Arctic fox on the map and decided to hunt it. Unfortunately, they had to put the lynx down as well. Food was scarce. Before the food could be prepared, however, Nikartros became dazed. Time to recite those ABCs, Nikartros. Then it was time to name the settlement. I picked a completely random name, as is custom, and moved on. They finally managed to set up a butcher table and began cooking real food. With some calories in them, they were able to finish up the southern room and turn it into a fridge, and a squirrel tamed itself. This is the best it would get for these colonists. Soon after, they spotted a pack of wild boar, an opportunity they couldn't pass up. They grabbed their machine pistols and went hunting. Nikartros got 1 boar, Menvi got another boar, and Dweeby got a rabbit. It was good eating tonight. But food alone wasn't enough to quell their misery. Perhaps it was because they were all still sleeping on a hardwood floor, so I removed their designated sleeping spots and put down plans for bedrolls in their places. What I failed to realize for some time was that they didn't have the materials for bedrolls, and would have to go a few days without anywhere decent to sleep. Wherever they dropped, that's where they slept. Well, Dwaby figured between the lack of sleep, malnutrition, and alcohol withdrawal, this was no way to live, so he fell into a catatonic coma where he could live 1,000 different lives, each presumably better than the one he currently had. It's just... yeah. Suddenly, the alarm sounded. The colony was undergoing its first raid. Filthy tribespeople from the comm camera of the Crag. I hate that name. Luckily, Bogogon had just woken up and her experience as a soldier would be invaluable in the battle to come. I ordered them to construct a sandbag barrier, but after having just gotten their sleeping spots back, all they wanted to do was sleep. Not today, Menvi. Now build! After the battle, the dead lay scattered about the field, but one was still alive. The colonists decided to build a prison as quickly as possible and take Ziguarto as prisoner. Unfortunately, they took too long to build the prison, and Ziguarto died. Oh well, maybe next time. Intoxicated by the feeling of their first combat victory, the colonists banded together like never before to build a new storage room for their weapons and armor, and laid plans for much improved living quarters. Some days passed and things were good, and that was the last time things would ever be good again, because out of the blue, and for whatever reason, Bogogon had snapped. Perhaps it was the gloomy weather or a passing comment. Maybe it was the heightened levels of testosterone in her system brought about by victory. No one can say for sure, but whatever the reason, she had gone berserk and began attacking anybody she saw. In a flash, she knocked Menvi out cold. Dwaby and Nikarchos went in to subdue her, but Nikarchos tripped while trying to block an attack and accidentally shot Bogogon in the head. She died instantly. Battered and bruised and in shock, Dwaby and Nikarchos began to clean up the mess. As they tended Menvi and themselves, our Lord Randy let us know of his boredom and decided to spice things up. He sent a trading caravan to the colony, followed by a fierce flash storm, and made Dwaby and Nikarchos aware of some transport pods that had crashed some time ago. Then their pet squirrel died. In her sickness, Bogogon must have tortured the poor thing before moving on to Menvi. Rest in peace, Squirrel One. But there was no time for mourning, because inside those transport pods were 2 people, and one was still alive. Dwaby made a daring rescue through fire and flame, and Nikarchos rescued a pair of red pants off of the dead one. They tried to remain strong, but their wounds were too grievous, and they both fell. Luckily, though, Menvi had regained her ability to walk, and came to the rescue. Now, with 3 patients to take care of and no more food, Menvi did the only thing she could to take care of them. She went into the storage room and retrieved Bogogon's body and fed it to Dwaby and Beryl, the transport pod survivor. Over the next few days, they would subsist on the remains of their fallen comrade. When they'd finished eating Bogogon, they began eating Beryl's friend. Upon seeing what these savages were doing and fearing that she would be next, Beryl began attacking everyone. Beryl went after Nikarchos, but he had a machine pistol and identified Beryl as a clear and present threat. He opened fire and shot her in the head, but it only seemed to slow her. Terrified by Beryl's resilience, Nikarchos abandoned all hope. He ran into the prisoner's room and shot himself. But then something strange happened. In that moment of utter shame, Nikarchos began to think. Was this how he wanted to die? As a coward? And if he managed to live, did he want to go on knowing that when it came down to it, he ran and hid instead of standing and fighting like a man? No!
Round 1. Fight! Fight! You lose!
After calming down, Menvi had found herself to be the only one capable of moving. She began to rescue those she had attacked, only to fall shortly after. But what's this? Sensing trouble, a mysterious man in black had arrived. Will he be able to set things right? Kuro the Illuminator might just save... Well, that's okay. She wasn't part of the colony anyway. What matters most is saving the colonists. He began in earnest, but it was just too much. He tried to keep everyone alive, but being only one person with 4 patients to take care of, something was bound to slip. Sweet dreams, dear Menvi. Soon after, Dwaybe had awoken from his time in Catatonia and went hunting with Kuro. Finally, they had a decent source of food. Things began to look salvageable for... While cooling off over the stove, Kuro began to think about what he had just done. Dwaybe never deserved that. He was completely helpless, and in a moment of selfishness and anger and extreme disgust, Kuro had killed him. He had been sent to help these poor people, not kill them. Filled with remorse, Kuro began digging graves to give these people the burials they deserved. A short time later, however, Nikarchos awoke to find Dwaybe. He had heard some loud banging just outside the room the night before, but he assumed Kuro had tripped over something. There was nothing wrong with Dwaybe when he went to sleep, and now he was dead. He knew that Kuro had killed him. Nikarchos had always had feelings for Dwaybe, but he'd never been able to work up the courage to approach him. Now he would never be able to tell Dwaybe how he felt. His mind rushed with thoughts of what now would never be. If he was lucky, he would die soon, and perhaps join Dwaybe in death. But he would not die without vengeance. In a fit of rage and anguish, Nikarchos rushed outside and beat Kuro to death, just as Kuro had done to his beloved Dwaybe. Kuro did not fight back. He appreciated the poetic justice, and to him, it felt right that he be killed by someone close to the person he killed, and in the same way. After killing Kuro, Nikarchos lay down on the grass and contemplated his actions. After some time, he made up his mind that although Kuro may have felt bad for what he had done, and had kindly allowed Nikarchos to exact his revenge, it didn't mean that Kuro wouldn't have killed again. Out here, it was survival of the fittest, and he couldn't trust Kuro to maintain his composure, especially with no one else around. He did what he had to do. Then, it was time to finish what Kuro had started and dig the rest of the graves. As he dug, Randy Random sent a naked wild woman and a rare thrumbo. In the dead of night, Nikarchos laid everyone who had been with him on his adventure to rest. He was alone now. Or was he? The wild woman wandered up to the camp. There may yet be hope for our 23-year-old hero. He followed, attempting to communicate with her. He figured that if he could get through to her, then maybe he could teach her how to live in a civilized way. Maybe she could teach him some of the tricks she'd used to survive. It could be the two of them against the world. But she didn't speak his language, and he was getting nowhere. If he was to survive, he would have to try something more radical. He decided to arrest the wild woman and keep her locked up and form a relationship with her day by day. He tried to grab her, but it turns out naked women don't like strange men grabbing them. She turned and bit Nikarchos on the leg. He tried to get away, but she wasn't gonna let him go that easy. In her state of panic, she went on to attack a buffalo and lost. As Nikarchos lay there, bleeding out into the mud, he realized that perhaps his approach was not ideal. Maybe he should have offered her food or something. As he closed his eyes, he felt at peace with himself. Finally, this torturous life of his would come to an end, and he could finally rest. A short time later, he woke up. In his sleep, he had rolled over and gotten some mud on his wound, which stopped the bleeding. As he headed back to camp, he turned and saw the wild woman lying helplessly out there in the rain. This was his chance. He went over and rescued the wild woman. He would nurse her back to health, and maybe she would be grateful. Maybe she would stay with him. The two spent the next couple of days recuperating, and it looked like finally everything might be all right. Then Randy awarded Nikarchos with 205 chem fuel. A few days later, Nikarchos was getting something to eat, and he succumbed to a serious wound, just as the wild woman had recovered herself and wandered away. The bite on his leg had reopened, and once again he found himself on the ground, bleeding out. Then a prostitute idol named Lou crash-landed and broke her legs. This time, Nikarchos could not rescue her or her pants. For 2 days, Nikarchos lay there, his blood seeping into the food Kuro had prepared earlier. But once again, Randy Random was with him, and his wound clotted. Now all he needed was some rest. It would be some time before he could put any pressure on his leg, or the wound would open up again. But before he could recover completely, a single raider showed up from the camera of the crag. Apparently, they had not forgotten about their humiliating defeat earlier and had sent their best man to finish the job. The raider began setting fire to the camp, but Nikarchos was asleep and did not hear. Then the raider began punching his way through the wall, and still Nikarchos was asleep and did not hear. Then the raider approached Nikarchos and picked him up. Well, this woke Nikarchos up, but it was too late. The raider carried him off to be enslaved in the salt mines of the camera of the crag, where Nikarchos would one day lead a slave rebellion and claim that land for himself. Good times were still ahead for Nikarchos, but unfortunately, we can't follow him there. Now, everyone was gone, and what they had built lie in ruin. Perhaps someday an intrepid adventurer will discover this place and decide to make it their home. And perhaps they will have better luck, and perhaps the potatoes will finally have grown. But as a new day dawns on this Rimworld and wild women wander about aimlessly, our story must come to an end. I do hope you'll join me for another story someday. Perhaps the next lot will make it through a whole season, and they won't eat each other. Thank you for watching.